I have with me Victoria Schwab. And Victoria is an author, and she has written so many books. And let me tell you, I got done with this series. I hope I have them in order. Yes, I do.
That's the right one.
This is the first one. This, and I want you guys to see the size of these books, okay? This is the second one, and this is her brand new one, A Conjuring Light. Second one's A Gathering of Shadows. And Victoria, the first thing that I've noticed about you is that you are the same age as my oldest son.
Really?
Yes. He was born in 87, and when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. Now, he has a family, and he's done things. He was in the military and everything. But I was like, you are a baby. You are. I think you're the youngest author I've had on here.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm honored.
Yes, and you've done so much. And I'm like thinking of like, oh my God, what is your future is just so like open. And okay, so first of all, I get these books. I ordered them, right? And I get all three of them at the same time. I'm like, okay. So here's some light reading for me to do.
Yeah. They're a lot.
It is a lot, but it is so... I was so engrossed because I did read them. And I recommend... I know the new ones out. And yes, you can read every one of them as a single book because you are very good at making them single books. For anyone who doesn't read the first one, you don't have to read the first one to understand because you weave it in beautifully. You do. You read it, but I don't know why you would. My thing is like, don't read all three of them because you can't get the big picture, and you want the big picture, even though they're standing.
Definitely miss something of the threads when you don't have all three of them.
I think that there are some series books that I really can read as standalone books. You know, and yeah, I've read some that they're really like standalone series. It kind of goes together, but I'm telling you, everybody read all three of these because you'll want to. Okay, Harry Potter, 7 books. You can read any one of those separately.
Yeah, those are definitely designed for episodes.
Yeah, why would you want to? Like, I just don't see a reason to. And because first of all, you fall in love with the characters, and you're going through a huge thing with them.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I know you wrote books before this series. You wrote some YA books and some middle school books. But these, because I was thinking before, after I read them, before I started looking you up and I was like, yeah, I don't know that I'd consider these YA, but you didn't consider them YA.
No.
So you did consider these adult books.
Yeah, my very first adult novel was called Vicious, which is a supervillain story, and then these came after that. And so the best way to tell with my books is if it has my full name, Victoria Schwab, then it's middle grade or YA, and if it has just V.E. Schwab, then it's adult.
Okay, there we go. So because I was thinking, and I homeschooled my children, so I'm always, looking because I still have some I have my last son that I'm homeschooling. And I was like, yeah, this is a little, he's a 14. And I think it's a little too...
It's definitely got a very large crossover audience, but it's a crossover audience for a specific kind of reader. You know what I mean? And so it's like I have 12 and 13-year-olds who read the series fanatically, but they're also reading a lot of adult fantasy and adult fiction. And then I've got 17 and 18-year-olds who are really just getting into it. And then the bulk of my readership is about 25 and up.
Okay, so then when I find out your age, so I'm reading these, right? And I'm like, this is, to me, adult Harry Potter.
Yeah.
In a weird way. And then I find out, of course, only because, it's magic and it's in London. So, of course, right away, your brain is going to go, I get it, but it's way more intense, way more...
Interestingly, it's my love letter to Harry Potter. Because if you'll know from your oldest son, I grew up in almost exact time with
And that
Harry.
was my question. Because he's going to be editing this. And I was telling him about this interview. And I said, when I saw her birthday, I was like, I get it. I totally get it. Because I've had my two oldest sons were the Harry Potter generation. They grew up with it.
As was I.
Yes. But I have to tell you, and I've read the Harry Potter books. I've read them as they were coming out. And when I say adult, I really do mean it that way because it's more detail, more darker, in a weird way. But I don't want to say, because it's not dark. I don't want people to think
it is dark, though. When I say it's my love letter to Harry Potter, I mean in the sense that so much of adult fantasy is grimdark, which is just relentless darkness. This is not that. The thing that I loved about Harry Potter and that I wanted to reference back to was the idea that it actually has quite dark themes as the series goes on, but you never lose hope and whimsy.
Right.
And these books are designed to have very dark themes, but they still have hope and whimsy.
Yes. And another, I have all these questions for you, because actually while I was driving, I was listening to them. I read some of it, listened to it. I went back and forth because I do a lot of driving. And I want to tell everybody out there, I want to give a shout out to the people that narrated this book, because I listened to a lot of Audible, okay? And the ones that I don't mention, I just don't mention, okay? So, I'm telling you.
Narrator. So the first book has its own narrator, because it was not with Macmillan.
Right.
But and he's fine. But the narrators for books 2 and 3 are a pair, and they're a married couple.
Oh, well, let me tell you.
Redding, who does Natural History of Dragons series, is the female voice, and her husband, Michael Kramer, who does all of Brandon Sanderson's fantasy, just this incredible, epic voice.
They have the best voices, and I love the going back and forth because of the female characters and the male characters. But then they were able to do both, because
they share.
There was sharing, but I felt like I was in. It's really hard when you're driving and you're listening to a novel. Okay, it's a very difficult thing to keep track, especially fantasy.
Oh, and I listen to about 30 audiobooks a year, so I feel you.
Yeah, excuse me. Especially when I'm doing fantasy and I have to envision fantasy. But they did such a good job. It was perfect. So
My father is not a reader. My father's not a reader, but I've managed to get him to read with audiobooks, because he listens to them at the gym, and so it's how he listens to all of my books. And I can always tell that an audiobook narrator has done a good job when my father is incredibly excited about the narration, because for him, he needs it to make the reading experience for him.
Absolutely, and it's really becoming a part of the marketing now, because so many people at the gym, driving, I mean, that is a huge audience for you now. It isn't just about the people that are going to buy the books. It's about the people who are listening, and a narrator can make or break it, and it isn't even about
I have books I've listened to that are just, I know that they've done a disservice to the book because I haven't liked the narrator, and I listen to books at the gym, and I listen to books commuting and walking. I read because I consider it part of my job. I read about 100 to 120 books a year. And in order to make that marker each year, I listen to a lot of them, right? And so I'm always amazed at how a good narrator can completely make the experience. And conversely, a bad narrator can just, I will switch to because I'm an author, because I know how important the words are. If I'm having a bad audio experience, I'll switch to the book.
Right. Me too. Me too. And, I do the, now for these, I had the books, but a lot of times I'll do the Kindle Audible, and they go back and forth. That makes it easier, but I didn't have to do that with this. So, and I always like when I get to a certain place and then I stop the car and I'm like, I'm all ready to hear. So,
it's different measurement system.
It's different. But okay, I have all these questions. Okay. So then my other question is do you have, you had so many quotes in this book. So I'm driving, right? And I'm listening to some of this and I'm like, do you write down, I know some authors and not enough of them, okay? But I know some older authors that I've interviewed and they actually have lists of their quotes.
No. But here's the thing. Here's the reason I don't need to do that. It's because Goodreads has an amazing quote feature. And if there's any quote that you like from a book, chances are someone has already loaded it into Goodreads. And so I don't keep track of them because it's actually a really interesting exercise as an author to see which quotes speak to people. I get a sense of it because it shows up in fan art. Delilah Bard has usually the most quoted lines of the entire series. She has, "I'd rather die on an adventure than live standing still." And people have it on t-shirts and I've seen it tattooed. All of these really cool things. And so if you go onto Goodreads, I think that one has 1,000 reposts. And so you can see what people consider to be the most popular quotes or the ones that spoke to them. And it can be really interesting to see which quotes speak to people the most.
Yes.
In fact, there was a quote from Vicious, from my first adult novel, that became so popular that in many ways it inspired my latest YA novel, and it's the epigraph at the beginning.
I couldn't believe it. And of course, as a reader, and I'm more tuned to it, I think, that a lot of people are, getting more so, especially if you're telling me Goodreads has that. I didn't even know about it. So that's awesome. But I love a good quote. And you're, like you said, Delilah has a lot of them, but I was like, wow, when you're writing, and this I've never asked an author, so you can tell me, do you think of the quote first, or does it just come out as a quote?
That's a great question. I think I can tell when the moment is right for a quote. And so I will just angst over a specific section trying to get a quotation right. If I think, this is going to be a moment people come back to. I'm very intentional about my dialogue being the primary place for quotations in my books. And so I build my dialogue in a really intuitive way. Instead of, a lot of writers will try to write dialogue in order, which doesn't actually make sense because you're just trying to dance around a point. So I take the point of the conversation and work outward both directions from it. So I write the core of what we're trying to say to each other first, and then work my way in and out. And so in writing the core of a conversation, if there's going to be a quotation embedded, something that I really have a sense people are going to read, like I knew with the I'd rather die on an adventure than live standing still, I spent enough time working on it. And sometimes quotes tend to just have a cadence to them. They tend to have a feeling. So it's less that I know going in, but I know the moment I've written it.
You get like this, like,
yeah, I get a gut feeling.
Yeah, you get like, that was just so good. That's awesome because, I mean, the fact that these, if I could just show people, these are long books. These are not for the lighthearted book reader, okay? These are
short for fantasy, as I've been informed.
Well, that's true, but I didn't feel like it. I got very into these books. It didn't feel, but on the other hand, what I'm thinking about when I see something like this is like your brain, okay? Yeah. Like, I want to live in your brain.
Oh, it hurts. It's a miserable place most of the time, I promise you.
Are you
it's
sure?
Just messy.
The way that you could create a world, that in the detail that you have created these worlds. So let me just back it up a little bit for everybody. The book is about 4 Londons, okay? And there's black, red, gray, white London. And they have all their each individual things going on in them. And then there is Cal, who is, and now it just slipped me. What does he call himself?
An Atari.
Thank you. An Atari. Okay. And he and one other person can go through all of them, but they have to be in order, which is just crazy, but it works. And it's like, it's crazy because I was like, how did she think of that? Like, you have to do it. It's not that, because at first I'm envisioning kind of like a circle.
Well, now it's pages in a book.
But it's pages, right. And then I got to that part where you said that it's pages in a book. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that was really good. That was really, that really helped to understand.
The other way to think of it is that Black London is the closest to is the center of the fire. And each other London is a farther distance removed from the fire. So magic is cooling as it moves outward from Black London. So Black London is the strongest. White London is actually the next strongest, but it's been severely damaged. Red London is the third strongest, but it's the healthiest. And then Gray London has forgotten itself. But yeah.
I'm speechless. So because not only did you do that, okay, so then you create those worlds, but there's languages, okay? So these Londons have English is sort of kind of a language that they all speak, but not really.
It's a royal language.
It's a royal language, right? And then you have the name of the other language?
Oh, Arnesian.
Arnesian.
I mean, I forget these things, too.
I know. I'm like, okay, the details. It's like, I know when I hear it, but to come up with these words and to come up with these different inside the worlds. Yeah. I mean, how?
Well, I do think that language is one of the most efficient shortcuts to culture in a world because it helps define insiders and outsiders. It helps define, like, when you think about what language, the amount of work it does, when you think of idiomatic expressions or curse words or fairy tales or stories, they tell us so much. Like a curse word can tell you whether a society believes in God, you know, like depending on how they swear. So there's a lot of work that gets done. And I will say I have this really weird relationship with language in books because I was really turned off by it as a young reader with Tolkien. I hated this idea that you had to prove you belonged to a fandom. And so for me, it's been very important for me that language is definitely an element in my books, but I want it to feel additive. I want it to feel like seasoning, like something that you're not going to miss the story if you don't take the time to learn the vocabulary. And I try to introduce the vocabulary in intuitive ways so that you might encounter a word in context 2 or 3 times. So you're never sat down and have it defined for you, but you'll understand in kind of an intuitive way because Delilah Bard is learning it at the same time you are as the reader.
Right.
So having an outsider always helps.
That does. That really helped. Like learning it. I felt like I was learning it with her.
Yeah.
You know? There were times that, and then, so there are these worlds, and then there's Cal, and there's Lila, right? You call her Lila. And then, okay, I did not, in my head, when I first started reading the book, I did not know how to pronounce R-H-Y-S.
Oh, Rye.
Yeah, Rice.
Rye like why.
Right. But and so in my head I had like 10 different ways, until I started listening to the audiobook, which audiobooks are also amazing for that when you don't know how to say something. But I
always tell who listens to audiobooks because when they ask me questions online, they don't know any of the spelling.
Yes.
But they have pronunciation, right?
Yes, exactly. And, as a woman, you get really attached to Delilah and her story, and and of course Cal too. And I loved that his magic. First of all, I love magic. I mean, of course, that doesn't everybody. Doesn't everybody just love the idea of magic?
That's the love letter part.
I really think that. But this is where in Harry Potter they're all learning magic. This is. Yes, some of them are kind of learning different things, but this is grown-up magic.
It's innate.
Yeah. This is different magic, and it's with those elements. And that was another thing. I was like, how did she think of that with the elements? Like, I loved that, even though it's basic. But then I'm thinking, but she thought of it.
But the rule with fantasy, I think, so often is accessibility. And so in order to make fantasy as accessible as possible, I try to make the rules of the world and the magical systems and all of those things as intuitive as possible, as natural as possible. And there's nothing more natural when dealing with magic than to root it in an elemental foundation.
Right.
Yeah,
I love that part about it.
Thank you.
I really did. I love the part where, Cal has basically everything. He can do anything, but then there are different people that can do the different, manipulate it in different ways. And then it kind of made me think, when you're reading books like this, I'm like, okay, so you really could, there is manipulating of elements. Maybe you convinced me, okay? I was, right along with it. I was buying into it hardcore. And
it's fun if you broad stroke design it the right way from the beginning. You're not boxing yourself in, so you can introduce somebody like Alucard Emery who interacts with magic in a very different way, and in a way that Kel actually can't.
Right.
And you introduce it, and it doesn't feel like you're breaking the world because you've set the world up in a way to allow for new things. I think so often it's hard not to box yourself in, but I wanted really, with this series, to give myself freedom to play with different things and yet have it not feel like I had interrupted my own world building. So.
Interesting. And I do think you accomplished that, because I think that there's some fantasy that can go so far that you're like, I can't go there. You know what I mean? It just
there's
keeps
an inside joke. There's
an
inside joke in Conjuring with a group of pirates called the Sea Serpents. And Delilah Bard and Alucard Emery are at sea, and he starts telling her about the sea serpents, and she's like, wait a second, you have giant dragons here too? And he's like, no. And she's like, well, you have magic, so how could I know that you wouldn't have dragons? And he's like, it's literally just a name for some, but okay. But it's kind of supposed to be poking fun at this idea that I have an issue with fantasy as a reader when it doesn't create boundaries.
Right.
When they're just like, oh, I want to have everything in the kitchen sink.
Let's
it's like,
unicorns, let's get some fairies.
Naturally there needs to be some rules.
Right. And then, okay, so Did you write this as a trilogy, or is there another one?
I wrote it as a series, and I didn't know how many books it would take, and it ended up taking 3.
Okay.
That's not to say that I'm done with the world, but there was a very specific story I was telling with those 3 books, and that story is done.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure when I talk to series authors like you, they're like, they think they're done, and then their fans just beg, you know?
I mean, I don't think I'm done.
But in a different way.
Yeah, I'm done with a very specific story.
Okay.
But I'm not done with the world.
I want to show people these covers, okay?
Aren't they beautiful?
I am a cover. Well, I think all readers are cover people, but I am specifically a cover person, and I will study covers. So I want to show this in the right order. So here we have the first
Darker
book.
Shade.
Yes, which is the first book, okay?
Which is Kel stepping into Red London.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Look at that above view of him. Now, do you have any say in these covers? I know a lot of people don't. Some people do.
Well, actually, I had no say in the first one. And then once we had settled on, I was given an option. They basically were like, would you like a painted style a la Brandon Sanderson, or would you like something that's like more of a poster graphic commercial? And I was like, give me that one. Mm-hmm. And then after Will Solly, the artist of this, had this design, then I got increasingly more creative control as the series went on. Because this is cool. But for this one, I mean, Will is one of the best cover designers in the business.
Yeah, that is I just love that, because that is exactly what I envisioned, you know.
Yeah.
As I'm reading it, I'm like, because I go back, I'll read, and then I go back to the cover, and I'm like, yes.
It's something that so many of the international editions have kept that cover.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so now this one, The Gathering of Shadows.
Yes, that's Delilah Bard.
That's Delilah. And what I wanted to know is that Delilah that is her, because she talks about wielding the knives.
Yeah, it's a tournament.
Yeah, the tournament. So it's
but it's not the mask.
But it's not
she
the
just
mask.
Has her eyes darked out.
Right, it's not the mask.
No.
Okay. And then
that's actually not her in the tournament. Sorry, that's her as the Saros, but not when she's got her full mask.
Right, because she doesn't have her mask, and she doesn't have.
Yeah.
This is her coat. The coat that she talks
about. Epic coats in the series, and then the Red London hands coming up.
Yes, and the knives.
Done in the mask type.
And she always has that, so that's very cool. And then, and the hands.
Yes, the Red London.
Isn't that cool? I love it.
And so I had a little bit of creative control in that one with the hands and such. That's what I thought.
I love, because I didn't even know, that was so subtle. I love when it's subtle, because at first I'm like, okay, that's still, and then as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism in each of the covers.
Yes, and then, of course, Conjuring.
And this is the one I had full creative control on. They gave me like 20 iterations of the cover, and I got to pick which elements I wanted.
And look at that. That is so cool.
It makes an hourglass, and Black London is encroaching from the sides, and you can't tell who's sitting on the throne.
Right. That's what I kept thinking. I'm like, wait, she's going to tell me who's like...
No. Well, so there's 2 lines of thought. It's either Holland or Rye.
Right.
And so people can choose which one they want to believe. I know which one I think it is, but my editor disagrees with me. So it's just sign that you can... It's meant to be. It's meant to be mysterious, though.
All right, but I'm going to go with Rye.
Yeah.
So, but what I also love, so this one is, the first one has this kind of a binder on it. But like when you're at a bookstore and you see like the red and the black, and this is what I love. It's like it sets it apart.
And the third one, when the third one comes, because those first 2 are paperbacks.
Yes.
So when the third one comes out in paperback, I think it's going to have a black spine. So they will have all 3 different spines.
Right, and I see, and the writing, just so everybody can see, because this is what I love, is like, because this is how we see the books when they're in the bookstore, and then you can see it's like, this is you, the typeset, it's it's beautiful, and I love it.
It's a full package. It makes me so happy.
Does it? I can tell you're like beaming.
Authors don't have that much say. What's best is if you can look up the top of my bookshelves, the Conjuring is all up there right now.
Oh, that's so cool.
So,
It just makes me so happy as a reader when I go into Barnes & Noble. And of course, we get most of our books now from Amazon and a lot. But when I go in there and I check them out. And I like when I see the series and I'm like, oh, there she is. Oh, there it is. It's also... It
makes me really happy.
Yes, it does. So, okay. So we're winding down. I got to think of my last two questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you are writing these, and like I said, I want to live in your brain because there are worlds in your brain.
It's such a messy place.
You have to organize your brain. When you decide, okay, I got to organize my brain on this, are you one of those people that outlines it like to death? Or do you just sit down and just be like, I know where I want it to go. I don't need it, and let the characters kind of, I heard all kinds of different things.
I'm neither. I'm a halfway point between those two. I'm what I call a connect the dotser. I have to have a roadmap. If I don't have a roadmap, I can't do it. I will wander in the wrong direction.
Okay.
But if I have too much designed, I get bored and then I don't want to write the book. So I have to create just enough freedom for me to wander without wandering too far off the beaten path.
Right.
And so I end up creating kind of a map, a very loose map of about 5 to 10 major moments, plot points, and then I let myself find my way between them, outlining more rigidly as I move through the book. So as I move through the book, I will strictly outline the next 5 to 10,000 words. But I keep everything else very loose until I get there.
Especially because as you're doing the different worlds and you're hopping between them, to keep them in your head, like, it's like, I always ask people like you who do that, it's like, do you write that world? Or can you hop between?
I jump back and forth.
You can jump.
So I think there's like
16
points of view. Yeah.
You got to remember like where that world was the last time you were there, and then
it's
like
constant. I mean, I really kind of like whatever the writing equivalent of method acting is. I do that in that when I'm working on something like the Shades of Magic series, at least half of my brain at any moment is there, not in the real world.
And that's another question. Well, that was, I usually ask that of fantasy authors. It's like, okay, so you're like, out taking a little jog. You're like, and in your head, you're like, okay, this one's this like, because you can't get out of that. It's hard to get out of the world.
It's constant. Yeah. And you kind of have to. You feel like you're just juggling the spinning plates because like, you're so afraid that if you stop thinking about it, it'll fall apart. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just kind of continually trying to keep all of the things aloft. Mm. It leads to a very particular kind of madness, drives all of my friends and family crazy.
Well, like I said before, like to me, you're a baby, okay? You're not even 30 yet. You'll be 30, but you are
my 13th book comes out this summer.
That is crazy. It's crazy. And my son that's editing this video right now, my oldest son, he is a wannabe writer and he is always messing around, and I told him about you and he's like, oh, that's so humbling. I'm like, because all he does is think about it. And when he watches this, and I'm going to tell him, he knows that I'm talking to you, but I mean, he was just like, I'm like, yes, she is on like her 14th, she's like on so many. Yeah, you just write. I mean, it's crazy. So what is your plan? Like, what is the next, like, what will we see next? Is there already a next, like, that's in?
So right now I'm contracted out through 2020. So I have a middle grade series starting next year. I have the sequel to Vicious, Vengeful, coming out next year. And then I have a lot of stuff I can't talk about.
Okay. Well,
but I basically not stopping.
I mean, like I said, you're a baby. You can keep going. You've got such a bright future ahead of you. You have a way with words that, people double your age are trying to work on, okay? Like, it's just, it's unbelievable. And I hope when your next one comes out that you, like, let me know and I'll let everybody know and we can talk about it. And even your middle grade, because I read a lot of, I know it's like I'm a weird person, but there's a lot of good YA. Like, I like YA. You
don't have to couch that. I mean, there's a lot of incredible middle grade and there's a lot of incredible YA out there. Absolutely. Whenever people are like, oh, YA sucks, I'm like, so does a lot of adult books, but like, you don't make umbrella statements about those. Okay. Like, there's great books out there.
Just go to Barnes & Noble YA section and tell me that is not a huge, 10 years ago, it was a shelf. Trust me, I go to books. And
also
now,
go to the middle grade section. Go to the middle grade section because there's like Newbery winners. There's really delightful. Also, just remember that Harry Potter was middle grade.
That's right.
So anytime people
look at all the adults
get on their high horse.
Yeah, exactly. So I love YA, and I'd love to talk anytime. You are welcome to come back and talk about your books anytime you want, and I would be happy to talk to you. You are amazing, and I can't wait to see what your future holds for you. So thank you so much, Victoria. Anyway, yeah, me too. Okay, well, we'll talk soon, okay?
Yeah, have a great night.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.